Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, speaking at Grand Strand Baptist Church. Privileged in that the people were very nice, and I loved the church, but the weather was lousy. Ostensibly, we scheduled that conference down there because Myrtle Beach also has golf courses, and I arrived Thursday. Pam and I dropped Pam in Charlotte, and I got down there Thursday afternoon, and I thought, well, I'll just see if somebody's out playing golf. And I saw guys on the golf course, so I thought, well, I can't resist the opportunity. It was 33 degrees with a 25 to 30 mile an hour wind, about 18-degree wind chill. So I was able to get out. I played 18 in about 2.5 hours. And then we played Monday in mist, dark clouds, 41 degrees and about 28-degree wind chill. And I left Wednesday morning with a coat of ice all over the palm trees and everything for about 50 miles inland. So it was, we told Eric Barger if he's doing this again, it's after April 1st. So we talked, I heard Rick Wiles on his True News radio program the other day, and he said, when he started his program back in 1998, he used to have to look really hard to find something that was happening every day for an hour show that was relevant prophetically. But he noticed that in the last 4 or 5 or 6 months, the problem is not filling an hour a day. The problem is not having that 1 hour show go into 3 or 4 or 5 hours because things are happening that quickly. And we talk about that convergence of events that the world seems to be in meltdown. A few relevant Bible verses, and then I'm going to go into some things about, I'm going to look at some things that have been happening in economy, church, and then Israel and Middle East, because those are the most relevant. In Isaiah 46, God says this, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things which have not been done, saying, my purpose will be established, and I will accomplish all my good pleasure. Calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my purpose from a far country, truly I have spoken, truly I will bring it to pass. I have planned it, surely I will do it. As troubling as things seem to be, there's no mistake that these things are unfolding, I believe, according to God's plan. In Luke 21, Jesus said, there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves, men fainting from fear in the expectation of things which are coming upon the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. But when these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Jude, the book of Jude is strategically placed, I think, within our canon of Scripture, just before Revelation. And Jude is, one commentator has called Jude of course, Acts is the Acts of the Apostles. Jude is the Acts of the Apostates. And Jude really wanted to write to them about, well, this is what he says, beloved, while I was making every effort to write to you about our common salvation, I felt the necessity to write to you, appealing that you contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all handed down to the saints. For certain persons have crept in unnoticed, those who were long beforehand marked out for this condemnation. Godly persons who turn the grace of God into licentiousness and deny our only Master and Lord Jesus Christ. I have a few comments about that in a moment. We live in a world that's changing dramatically on many levels, things that are unprecedented in history, and I've talked a little bit about the demography changes, and this is a chart that shows in 2020 how many, around the world, how many people are supporting elderly people over the age of 65. That would be some of you people out there, not me, yet. Although I could pass probably. And that's working age people. So you'll see that, you know, some of the countries right now, it's a pretty good balance. But when you get out to 2060, you start to see that in most of the world, it will only be 40 to 50 working age people supporting the elderly that, let's see, number of elderly people. There'll be 40 to 50 elderly people in most of the world for every 100 working age people. Those numbers don't work very well. In some countries, it'll be as high as 80 elderly people for every 100 working people. And if the Lord tarries by 2100, vast swaths of the earth will be in this stage where they will have 60 to 70 elderly people over the age of 65 for every working age, for every 100 working age people. Those numbers are stunning. The age period, it used to be a pyramid demographically, a lot of people, young people, fewer at the top. But I read a statistic now that there are, it's like 55 million or 60 million people in the world now over the age of 85, which is just not too many years ago. That number was in the tens of thousands, and now it's in the tens of millions. These numbers just don't work demographically. This will have huge geopolitical implications, again, if the Lord waits that long. In our own country, we have things that are happening. They're talking about a 1,000-year drought, things that are unprecedented. And so for the second year, the most fertile or most productive farmland in the United States will not receive any government irrigation water. Wells are drying up. That is the breadbasket of America. A few years back, the Central Valley in California produced about 60% of all the vegetables consumed in the United States. If they're not growing food, what do you think that's going to do? It's a pretty dire situation out there. And of course, now we have the trustworthy people at the Internal Revenue Service. As the Investors Business Daily said, the IRS scandal entered its 659th day on Friday, says a law professor who keeps track. But that date might be historic, given that for the first time the public learned that a criminal probe is actually taking place. See, they said they didn't have any emails. The Inspector General, I saw his testimony before Congress. He got in a car and he drove an hour and a half from D.C. out to Martinsburg and said, "Do you have any of these tapes? Because it looks like you do." And John Koskinen, the guy on the right, had said, "They don't have any tapes. They're all gone. All Lois Lerner's emails are gone. Too bad." So he drove out to Martinsburg and he said, "Do you have any of these tapes?" And they said, "Well, yeah, we have about 780 of them." And he said, "Did anybody ever ask you for them?" And he said, "No, nobody ever asked us." They did some more checking, found another document that had been not produced by the government previously, and that had 440 tapes on it. So now they have tens of thousands of emails that have not been produced. Here's just a little interview with one of the guys on the Oversight Committee.
Oversight Committee Chair Jason Chaffetz joins us. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Greg.
So what's going on?
Well, it's pretty stunning to learn that after all this time, all these excuses, we have the emails, now the tapes have been destroyed, they've been over-erased, and then you come to find out that the Inspector General starts to look at it, and in 15 days' time, start to finish, they were able to find the tapes. When they talk to the IT people and say, "Well, what about these tapes?" they say, "Well, nobody ever asked us for the tapes. We've had subpoenas, we've had letters, we've had confirmation from the IRS commissioner on multiple occasions, and they've been sitting there all along."
You say they. I mean, but this really is the commissioner. He has testified, and I assume under oath, or if he's not under oath, at least he knows the responsibility. And he's acted so horrified. It seemed like that anyone would challenge him on this. But he frankly either didn't do his job or he is hiding something. Now, didn't do his job is probably what I'm more inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt, but this looks really bad.
But they have changed their story multiple times with great certainty. In fact, he testified at one point that he was there to certify that these tapes were unrecoverable. They sent us letters to that effect.
So why did he tell you that?
So when Obama said that his administration would be the most transparent in history, I think now what we know he meant is that the criminal activities of his administration will be the most transparent in history. We have a man of lawlessness at the head of our government. That has prophetic significance in the fact that, what you're seeing is, in my estimation, a soft coup taking place in the executive branch. Now, I bring this up because everybody always thought that nothing like this could ever happen in the United States. And that things couldn't be that bad, and we would never be along with part of the rest of the world when things really went down the tubes. But now we may be leading it. What you need to understand that is in the end times, things change quickly and dramatically and in ways that you might not expect. It is stunning to watch this happen to the United States. I can play you clips of Obama saying that if Congress sends me a bill telling me I can't do something, I'll just veto it, or I'll continue doing it and I'll go to the courts and let them tell me. And if I don't like what the courts say, I'll do whatever I want anyway. This is troubling, deeply troubling. And I just don't see the outrage among leaders in certain political parties that seem to be concerned about putting a stop to it. Because I think what's happening is this fog, I talk about the fog of deception that's going to come over the world in the end times, and people just won't be able to reason anymore. And I think you're seeing it happen right in front of your eyes, even here in our country. It's stunning. Things are happening elsewhere that just don't make any sense. Here's an article on the front page of the New York Times. I think it was yesterday or today. Europeans are paid to borrow but get a bill for trying to save. At first, Ava Christensen barely noticed the number. Her bank called to say that Miss Christensen, a 36-year-old entrepreneur here, had been approved for a small business loan. She whooped, she danced, a friend took pictures. I was so happy I got the loan, I didn't hear everything he said, she recalled. And then she was told about her interest rate. It was minus 0.0172%, less than zero. While there would be fees to pay, the bank would also pay interest to her for borrowing money, just a little over $1 a month, but still. These are strange times for European borrowers, as if a wormhole has opened up to a parallel universe where the usual rules of financial gravity are suspended. Investors lent Germany nearly $4 billion this week, knowing they would not be fully repaid. Bonds issued by the Swiss candy maker Nestle recently traded in the market for more than they will ever be worth. So some wealthy people are withdrawing their monies from banks because the banks are saying that they may charge very large fees for parking your cash there. So they're looking for places just to warehouse their cash so they don't have to pay money just to store what they have. It's totally up. Do you agree that it's totally upside down? Backwards. John Dickey's a banker, and he's sitting here looking like, I'm not sure how I would even advise clients in that day and age. So if you need some extra money, go get a loan. You'll get even more. The bank will pay you while you have the money. Doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but they're not getting it all in fees. But it's upside down. I mean, People are buying bonds, a $100 bond, knowing they'll only ever get back $98 from the government. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And eventually, it crashes. Well, our friend Ruth Gator Ginsburg was interviewed recently about her estimation of what will happen with gay marriage in the United States, and this is what she had to say.
Are you concerned that if this court this year were to say that there is a constitutional right for same-sex couples to marry, that there are parts of the country that would not be able to accept or would not accept that decision?
I think it's doubtful that it wouldn't be accepted. The change in people's attitudes on that issue has been enormous. In recent years, people have said, this is the way I am. And others looked around, and we discovered it's our next door neighbor. We're very fond of them. Or it's our child's best friend, or even our child. I think that as more and more people came out and said, this is who I am, and the rest of us recognized that they are one of us, that there was a familiarity with people that didn't exist in the beginning when the race problem was on the front burner, because we lived in segregated communities and it was truly a we-they kind of thing. It's not so, I think, of the gay rights movement. So I think it would not take a large adjustment. And of course we shouldn't speak much more about this subject, because one way or another it will be decided before we leave town in June.
So the decision is coming. We know where she stands. But this has been a sea change. I think I showed some statistics, I don't know if it was here or down in South Carolina, that now the general population approves of this about 65% approve of same-sex marriage. You know, the Mormons are coming out in favor of it as well. Now, why do you think they're doing that? Yeah, because once you start same-sex marriage, you have no rational basis to deny any kind of marriage like polygamous marriages. And the slippery slope that everybody said existed is there. Somebody put this on my Facebook wall this week. This is how people look at Scripture now. Yeah, I like the judge not part, so that's all that I'm going to listen to. By the way, in the next few weeks, as I have time to get it done, I intend to go through a series of messages that Andy Stanley has been preaching in his church. Now, Andy Stanley is one of the most influential evangelical pastors. His church is very large, one of the largest in the country, and he also has the Catalyst conferences that are very influential. A lot of pastors go there for training. For example, last summer, you remember I played the article that my friend Jim Fletcher had written about the fact that he went to Catalyst West in Dallas, and they had a mystic lady there named Phileena Hurwitz who led the group and trained the group in centering prayer, Roman Catholic mysticism. She identifies as a Roman Catholic. As I researched that, I found that she's not only spoken there, but she spoke at Biola University Chapel and taught on the same subject. And last April, she was at Taylor University in Indiana, speaking on the same subject, and even led the student body in a form of centering prayer at the end. This is not biblical, but this is coming. But a lot of this is coming into the church through Andy Stanley, and his new series is, if I could have some quotes from that, I think you'll be stunned as we go through this, that the Scripture is really not that important. Common sense is what's really important. And you don't even really need, he said in his sermon last Sunday, You don't even really need to believe that Jesus is God. You can just follow Jesus and you'll still have a pretty good life. Now, this is predictable. I challenge people as we go through this to find differences between what he says now and what another influential evangelical pastor was saying about 10 years ago and continues to say. And I ask you to tell me the difference. In fact, here's what that other evangelical pastor just said in an interview with Oprah a couple weeks ago.
Marriage, gay and straight, is a gift to the world because the world needs more, not less. Love, fidelity, commitment, devotion, and sacrifice.
That's Kristen Bell.
I think it's great that you all made a conscious choice to include gay marriage in here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, why?
Because one of the oldest aches in the bones of humanity is loneliness. And it's one of the things that goes way, way back. Loneliness is not good for the world. And so, whoever you are, gay or straight, it is totally normal, natural, and healthy to want somebody to go through life with. It's central to our humanity.
Yeah.
We want someone to go on the journey with.
When is the church going to get that?
We're close,
I think it's evolving. I think it's...
Lots of people are already there. We think it's inevitable, and we're moments.
A moment away from the church
absolutely.
accepting it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you meet someone, and most of the time when people have resistance to this, and I say to them,
You think we're moments away?
I think culture is already there, and the church will continue to be even more irrelevant when it quotes letters from 2,000 years ago as their best defense. When you have in front of you flesh and blood people who are your brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and coworkers and neighbors, and they love each other and they just want to go through life with someone.
Well, you sound really progressive to me because I've talked to pastors who are still saying that.
I think there are a lot of people who, as they see culture moving, their response is to dig in deeper.
Yeah.
Is to
Yeah, it's
hold their
natural.
ground,
Yeah.
fight against it. So I think that there are both things happening.
Yeah.
There are churches that are moving forward or into that area, and there are churches who are just almost regressing and making it more of a battle.
Yeah.
I stand by everything I ever said about that man. I don't like to use the H word, but I think it applies in his case. Without question now. We're progressive, you're regressive if you're fighting it. Yet those people will pull out the scripture and say, judge not. We can judge you as being regressive. But we're evolving. We're much better than you are. But we're not judging you now. We're not judging you. We're just stating facts. Okay, here's a fact. They're heretics. All pastors who supported that man need to repent in front of their congregations and apologize for the damage that they've done to the faith of people. Now, I'm going to go through the Andy Stanley stuff, but I guarantee you, folks, if you listen carefully, you will hear the same strains in his preaching that you heard in Rob Bell years ago. It has consequences, though. Here's someone who's taking a stand.
The Attorney General contacted the couple. They didn't file the initial complaint. The Attorney General took it on after reading reports in the media. And the Attorney General has relentlessly pursued Barronelle ever since. The court's decision, as well as the Attorney General's actions, are sending a very clear, unmistakable message to Barronelle and anyone like her, which is that if you dare to decline, the government will bring about your personal and your professional ruin if you don't help celebrate same-sex marriage.
And Barronelle, they offered to make you a deal. They said, you pay this fine, but also stop refusing specific weddings, and we'll call it a day, and it's all over. And you said?
No. It's not about the money. It's about freedom. It's about my 8 kids and our 23 grandchildren and the future and now. There's not a price on freedom. You can't buy my freedom. And if it's me now, but tomorrow it's going to be you. You got to wake up.
Do you think people get that? Do you think maybe hearing your story, seeing a real person and knowing this is how these policies play out, you know, we talked about it wasn't possibly that you would just be out of business, but we're talking about a decision by the Attorney General here, the State Attorney General, that sounds like they could come after everything you have personally as well.
They're talking about bullying me into doing something that is against my faith. They can't do that. They can take away, they can get rid of me, but they can't get rid of God.
Good for her. But this thing is a juggernaut in our culture. Some lady approached me after one of the sessions down in South Carolina and said, what are you going to do when you have to sign that affirmative action statement that says you actively support this same-sex marriage? And I said, why do you ask me that? She said, well, she works at a public educational institution, and she says they are that close to making me sign something like that. And I'll have to quit my job. It's going to happen, folks. You ready for it? Here's another consequence of it. There was a report that I saw that the federal government is not seeking in the new defense budget funding for A-10 Warthog fighter jets, really sort of like a airborne tank that's a real workhorse, and some other important military items. Why? Because the new Secretary of Defense said we need that money for something else. Now, what could be important in a time when we are faced with crises everywhere in the world that we would not want to have one of our best workhorse fighter jets funded completely? Well, here's the reason. New Defense Secretary Ashton Carter said Sunday that transgender people shouldn't be prevented from serving in the U.S. military solely based on their gender identity, noting it should not preclude them from service. So we need the money so they can have gender reassignment surgeries while they're in the military. Do you see how far down the road we've gone, people? Do you think, I don't know that we can turn back at this point. It's just pray that God protect us. This is stunning stuff. The world is a mess. This happens. Putin critic was gunned down in an assassination while he was walking on a bridge right next to the Kremlin in Moscow the other day. He initially supported Putin, but then thought that Putin had become just another thug. And there's a videotape, you can watch it, of what actually happened. Car pulled up, 4 shots in his chest, and he's gone. Maybe it'll get better when Hillary Clinton's in office. I think you might have heard that her foundation, the Clinton Foundation, accepted tens of millions of dollars of contributions from Arab foreign governments while she was Secretary of State. You think anything will happen about that? And as this editorial cartoon from Investors Business Daily says, what difference at this point does it make? Something that she said previously. And I think, well, let's look at the Middle East. I mentioned this a while back that this might happen. Israel and Jordan have now signed a historic plan to save the Dead Sea. They are going to bring water from, the Dead Sea would be right about here. And this is looking down what they call the Arabah, A-R-A-B-A, the Arabah, this valley that exists between Israel and Jordan. It's, of course, the Dead Sea shore is the lowest point of land on Earth, 1,320 feet below sea level. So they're going to bring land, water from the Dead Sea through pipelines, and they're going to replenish because the southern part of the Dead Sea is essentially completely evaporated. So they're going to restore it with salt water from that direction, because the Jordan River, too many people take water off the Jordan River, so there's nothing there that's left. And it has huge implications, because this is a very interesting engineering feat to do this. They'll be able to take the fall 1,300 feet, a quarter-mile drop in about 100 miles, and use that to push water through desalination filters, use it to power turbines for electrical power, and that type of thing. Now, we know that prophetically, there's something that's going to happen at the end of the 70th week. There's going to be a great earthquake. And Ezekiel talks about the Mount of Olives is going to split in two, and water is going to flow from out underneath the Temple Mount down through that valley. And it's described in Ezekiel 40 through 48. It's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And what's going to happen? The Dead Sea is going to have life in it. Fish life, plant life. Now it's completely dead, but the water from the Temple Mount will sweeten the waters of the Dead Sea, the most greatest percentage of salinization of any body of water on planet Earth. And that's yet prophetic. So this has nothing to do with prophecy, but it's just that the physics of the area. But I did talk to somebody who is really, their son had been in Israel recently and had gone and swam the underground, what's believed now by the rabbis to be the Gaian River, that's discussed in the early chapters of Genesis. They believe that the Garden of Eden actually was there in Jerusalem. And there's a body of water, a massive body of water under Jerusalem. So this is all stuff that could be fulfilled. Let me skip ahead a few things. Our government this week, we had some hearings about what was going on with terrorism in the world. Here is what John Kerry had to say in a congressional hearing.
I know not everybody here is a believer in taking steps to deal with climate. I regret that. But the science keeps coming in stronger and stronger and stronger. On the front page of today's newspapers, stories about an Alaskan village that'll have to be given up because of what is happening with climate change. There's evidence of it everywhere in the world. And frankly, and last thing, this is counterintuitive, but it's true. Our citizens, our world today is actually, despite ISIL, despite the visible killings that you see and how horrific they are.
What do you think he's going to say? It's awful, it's horrible.
We are actually living in a period of less daily threat to Americans and to people in the world than normally, less deaths, less violent deaths today than through the last century. And so even the concept of state war has changed in many people's minds, and we're seeing now more asymmetrical kinds of struggles. So I would say to you that I see encouragement when I travel the world. I see people wanting to grow their economies. I see vast new numbers of middle class, people who are traveling. I see unbelievable embrace of...
Okay, mercy stop there. I see women that are prisoners of the Islamic State begging to be killed so they don't have to be sex slaves to these monsters anymore. I see a president that, well, talk more about that. Well, maybe James Clapper can clarify a little bit what John Kerry actually meant. He's the national security advisor. He's been head of the CIA, been in the security business and military for over 30 years. Here's what he had to say, what he thinks is going on.
Two overall comments at the outset. One, unpredictable instability is the new normal. The year 2014 saw the highest rate of political instability since 1992, the most deaths as a result of state-sponsored mass killings since the early 1990s, and the highest number of refugees and internally displaced persons, or IDPs, since World War II. Roughly half of the world's currently stable countries are at some risk of instability over the next 2 years. The second overall comment is this pervasive uncertainty makes it all the harder to predict the future. 2014 and 2015 saw a number of events that illustrate this difficulty. The North Korean attack on Sony, the most serious and costly cyber attack against U.S. interests to date, the Ebola epidemic, and the small-scale but dramatic terrorist attacks in Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, and the United States. Again this year, I'll start with cyber threats. Attacks against us are...
Well, he goes on to talk more about some of the details. You can see his testimony at C-SPAN. The hearing that Kerry was in, one of the hearings that Kerry was in, then turned to a discussion about Benjamin Netanyahu's speech on Tuesday night. And here's the question and answer with Kerry on that.
He is somebody, as the ranking member indicated, with an existential concern about this. And
talking
he
about
says
Netanyahu.
That's going to be a bad agreement. It's so bad, that's why I'm coming to speak to Congress. I've got to go over the heads of the Secretary of State and the President of the United States and plead with Congress and the American public to derail this agreement because it's going to threaten Israel and, frankly, other nations in the region. So he's not keeping his powder dry, Mr. Secretary. He's not keeping his powder dry, and it's awfully hard for us to pretend he is.
And that's something that you and people in Israel and everybody else have to make your judgment about. I'm not going to get dragged into that particular choice or how it came about.
But
I don't think that's helpful. I will say this.
It's his criticism I'm asking you to address.
Well, let me say this. The Prime Minister, as you recall, was profoundly forward-leaning and outspoken about the importance of invading Iraq under George W. Bush, and we all know what happened with that decision. He was extremely outspoken about how bad the interim agreement was, during which time he called it the deal of the century for Iran, even though it has clearly stopped Iran's program, and more importantly, he has decided it would be good to continue it. So, I talk to him frequently. We work very, very closely together. We are deeply committed. This administration, I think we've done more to help Israel. I have a packet of 25 pages or more of things we've done on behalf of Israel in the course of this administration to stand up for it, stand with it, protect, fight back against unfair initiatives. So we won't take a backseat to anybody in our commitment to the state of Israel, but he may have a judgment that just may not be correct here. And, let's wait and hear what he says. I'm not going to prejudge his statement any more than he should prejudge this agreement. But when we've heard, if appropriate, I'll respond.
Well, this is an interesting thing because the Mossad is coming out. They're leaking documents that seem to contradict Netanyahu's concerns. This is all part of a big election political thing. The former head of the Mossad has come out and actively campaigned against Netanyahu. But it was just discovered this week and reported with some verification that despite what was supposedly full disclosure, the mullahs in Tehran have had a secret underground facility under Tehran where they've been enriching uranium that was previously undisclosed. They're lying. I don't see why anybody can see this. And they've said, I believe them when they say they want to kill, death to America, death to Israel. When they have those rallies, I believe that. But what our government has done is just stunning with regard to Israel. Here's Susan Rice on Charlie Rose last week.
The relationship between Israel as a country and the United States as a country has always been bipartisan. And we've been fortunate that politics have not been injected into that relationship. What has happened over the last several weeks, by virtue of the invitation that was issued by the Speaker and the acceptance of it by Prime Minister Netanyahu on 2 weeks in advance of his election, is that on both sides there has now been injected a degree of partisanship, which is not only unfortunate, I think it's destructive of the fabric of the relationship, and it's something that...
It's destructive of the fabric of the relationship.
Well, Charlie, take my point. It's always been bipartisan. We need to keep it that way. We want it that way. I think Israel wants it that way. The American people want it that way. And when it becomes injected or infused with politics, that's a problem.
You think he's coming here because he wants to influence the election in Israel?
I'm not going to ascribe motives to the Prime Minister. I think let him explain for himself. But I think the point is, we want the relationship between the United States and Israel to be unquestionably strong, immutable, regardless of political seasons in either country, regardless of which party may be in charge in either country. We've worked very hard to have that, and we will work very hard to maintain that.
You know, she's as big a liar as Ayatollah Khomeini.
Why would the administration want to elevate this speech? I know they oppose his appearing, they've made that clear, but why make it such a personal and highly political criticism like they have the last week?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons, Paul. It is, excuse me, obviously a public relations offensive to marginalize and diminish the Israeli Prime Minister in advance of this speech.
But they're elevating its prominence. This is going to be the speech of the year.
I completely agree. I mean, I don't see how this works for the administration. Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to stand before Congress. More people than imaginable are going to watch this speech. You can bet it is going to be the most substantive, detailed, eloquent case against this deal that anyone has made. It's going to be a great speech. And after it's done, the administration is going to have to defend itself against the details in Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech.
I think, look, I think the administration is trying to accomplish two things. They're after vulnerable Democrats who who might shy away from...
In the Senate.
In the Senate. Just last month, the Senate Banking Committee voted overwhelmingly with large Democratic support for something called the Kirk-Menendez bill, which would impose very tough sanctions on Iran in the event of a failure of the deal, bringing Kirk-Menendez into a veto-proof area.
Potentially, they're on the cusp,
which they're worried about. So they want to peel away some of that Democratic support. The other thing they're trying to do is Israel has an election in just a few weeks, and they hope that by putting such brutal pressure on the Israeli government, the Israeli electorate may say, we want a different prime minister because we feel our relations with the U.S. are at risk.
I think it could backfire in both instances.
Right. Could backfire, but could they defeat Netanyahu?
Well, look, it happened.
That's clearly what they want.
It happened in 1992 with a previously couped conservative prime minister. It has happened. The problem is Israelis don't trust Barack Obama. They think that he's personalized his differences with Bibi. They don't trust him to stop an Iranian nuclear bomb. And I think, bottom line, the Israelis are more worried about an Iranian nuclear bomb than they are with what remains of the Obama administration.
Dan, what about John Kerry's critique of Netanyahu that he was wrong about Iraq? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall that John Kerry voted for the Iraq war, and even in 2003 praised the president for a while, George W. Bush, as saying it was good that he disarmed Saddam Hussein.
You know, I think John Kerry is carrying out a strategy that was designed in the White House, and for him to be dragging the Iraq war into what is clearly a debate over the Iranian nuclear deal, I think smacked of desperation. And it was simply the Secretary of State trying to pull another argument out of thin air. And you're right, it just doesn't float. I think they realize they are on weak ground. John Kerry also said you can't talk about the details of this deal because no one yet knows what they are. It hasn't been completed. What an extraordinary admission at this point.
Well, but that's so they can avoid criticism. But the framework of the deal, Brett, is coming into view through leaks from the administration. In particular, one that came out this week is the idea of a sunset provision, that anything that Iran agrees to would phase out and go away, perhaps, within 10 or 15 years.
Right, so after that 10 or 15-year period, Iran would be allowed to become a full-fledged member of the NPT, that is to say, to have all the nuclear
non-proliferation.
Right, which is to say that they could build as many centrifuges of any kind that they wanted without restriction, so long as they didn't build a nuclear weapon itself, which means that this deal isn't stopping Iran from getting a bomb. It's actually facilitating its membership, its ultimate membership into the nuclear club. The other thing about this deal is that, according to what we're hearing, it will allow the Iranians to have an enrichment capability of about 6,500 centrifuges.
This is enriching uranium, which is the raw material for a bomb.
Right, which you can do to fuel a reactor or to build a bomb. Just about a year or two ago, they were talking about maybe 500 centrifuges, a symbolic number.
And before that, they were saying, look, you shouldn't have any enrichment capacity at all. And now we've ceded the enrichment capacity. We're ceding some industrial structure for building a bomb and a phase out.
Right, and even now, just the other week, the International Atomic Energy Agency complained that Iran continues to stonewall the agency's request to see parts of Iran's secret weaponization program. So they are cheating on their commitments even as they're negotiating a deal.
Well, consider what we're describing here. Essentially, the administration is setting up a process with Iran. Iran is achieving a process that formalizes a country's path towards achieving nuclear weapons capacity. And if you are Turkey or if you are Saudi Arabia, you would say to yourself, if we have set up a process for doing this, then we too are going to embark on the same process, create a condition of proliferation across the Middle East.
Brett, do you still think it's going to happen? I mean, you've been skeptical that a deal would come together. Briefly, do you think now maybe we are going to get one?
Well, I actually don't think so. I hold to my view. Khamenei, in the end of the day, is going to veto it.
This is the Iranian supreme leader. Okay, all right, thanks, Brett.
Okay, writing a week ago in the Jerusalem Post, Caroline Glick said this: what planet are these people living on? The issue, and it could hardly be more urgent or grave, is not Netanyahu's behavior. By the way, it's now come out that Obama did go to the Netanyahu went to the Obama administration and told him that he had been invited to speak at Congress. So everything that the Obama administration has said and continues to say, that they were not aware of this, that Boehner did it, went behind their back, Netanyahu went behind their back, has been proven to be a lie. And they continue to spout the lie. You heard Susan Rice doing it the other day, despite the fact that it's been reported that this happened by things like hardly right-wing newspapers like the New York Times. I say it again, this is a man of lawlessness and deceit that is in the White House. And it's almost impossible to believe, but listen, this is happening in our time. Okay? The issue is how to stop Iran. It is astounding, Caroline says, to claim that Netanyahu is putting the relationship with Obama at risk. That is what everyone should be talking about. And this morning, before he left for the United States, Netanyahu went to pray at the Western Wall, says that he hopes that the things will come about. And Khamenei had a rally in Tehran on Friday, which it was shouted, "Death to America, death to Israel." Here's a brief clip of Netanyahu's speech last week in Jerusalem about what he hopes to accomplish when he comes to America.
Why am I going to Washington? I'm going to Washington because as Prime Minister of Israel, it's my obligation to do everything in my power to prevent the conclusion of a bad deal that could threaten the survival of the State of Israel. The current proposal with Iran, to Iran, would endanger Israel. It would enable Iran to break out to its first nuclear device within an unacceptably short time. And it would allow Iran to build an industrial capability to enrich uranium that could provide the fuel for many bombs in the coming years. A regime that openly calls for Israel's destruction would thus have, finally, the means to realize its genocidal aims.
And listen, this is not new historically. I don't know if I mentioned this 2 weeks ago. The speech is taking place on Tuesday night. The Jewish Feast of Purim starts on Thursday. What is the Feast of Purim? That's to celebrate a time when another Jewish leader took a risk to take a stand against another Persian leader who had stated that he wanted to wipe out the Jewish people in one fell swoop. The timing could not be better. Well, Jeremy mentioned this when he spoke a week ago Monday. A commentator in the Jerusalem Post said this in his article the other day: historians will be baffled. Allow me to conclude with one more excerpt from Churchill, comparing the situation between Neville Chamberlain and Hitler, Barack Obama, and the Ayatollah Khomeini. Allow me to conclude with one more excerpt from Churchill. He warned that if mortal catastrophe should overtake the British nation and the British Empire, historians 1,000 years hence will still be baffled by the mystery of our affairs. They will never understand how it was that a victorious nation with everything in hand suffered themselves to be brought low and to cast away all that they had gained by measureless sacrifice in absolute victory. The same goes for Israel. Caroline Glick, writing Friday in the Jerusalem Post in a column titled "In Israel's Hour of Need," said this: for his part, for the past 6 years, Obama has undermined Israel's national security. He has publicly humiliated Netanyahu repeatedly. He has delegitimized Israel's very existence, embracing the jihadist lie that Israel's existence is the product of post-Holocaust Jewish or European guilt rather than 4,000 years of Jewish history. He and his representatives have given a backwind to the forces that seek to wage economic warfare against Israel, repeatedly indicating that the application of economic sanctions against Israel, illegal under the World Trade Organization treaty, are a natural response to Israel's unwillingness to bow to every Palestinian demand. The same goes for the movement to deny the legitimacy of Israel's very existence. Senior administration officials have threatened that Israel will become illegitimate if it refuses to surrender to Palestinian demands. Last summer, Obama openly colluded with Hamas' terrorist war against Israel. He tried to coerce Israel into accepting ceasefire terms that would have amounted to an unconditional surrender to Hamas's demands for open borders and the free flow of funds for the terrorist group. Netanyahu is not coming to Washington next Tuesday to warn Congress against Obama's nuclear deal with Iran because he seeks a fight with Obama. Netanyahu has devoted the last 6 years to avoiding a fight with Obama, often at great cost to Israel's national security and to his own political position. Netanyahu is coming to Washington next week because Obama has left him no choice, and all decent people of goodwill should support him, and those who do not and those who are silent should be called out for their treachery and cowardice. It is one of the defining issues of our time. Is it okay if I go another 5 minutes or so? Okay. I don't care. I just ask it as a formality. I'm going to do it anyway. So, but at least it makes me, act like I care. A young Jewish man, Muslims in Europe are an interesting thing. The demographics are not good for Europe because of the declining birth rates among native Europeans and high birth rates among Muslim immigrants. We had a discussion about this at the Prophecy conference. A lot of people say, well, between the rapture and the beginning of the 70th week, there will be a gap. Now, the reason why they're putting a gap in there is because if it's a revived Roman Empire out of the European Union, Europe is pretty weak right now. I mean, it will take decades for it to come up to the strength of anything approaching the United States right now. So they're putting a gap in there, but my point was, if it's 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years, Europe's going to be predominantly Muslim-controlled anyway. So the Muslim thing is not going away. Here's a little minute-and-a-half clip of a guy walking around Paris with kippah and the tallits that Jeremy wore, and you can watch what happens as he walks around. He had somebody walking ahead of him carrying a backpack with a camera in it. And you'll see as he encounters these different people, they swear at him, they curse at him, and he's got the kippah on and the little towel, the tallits there along his trousers. He gets spit on a number of times. Here's a guy who follows him for a while. Follows him, and spits on him, and now he's gone. Spit on again. Encounters some Palestinians. Now, this is a condensed version of about 10 hours of him walking around. He was interviewed about, he's called a homo. He was interviewed on I think an English program about what happened. And just listen to a little bit of this.
You filmed before the terrible events in Copenhagen. The Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says Jews in Europe should move to Israel. They're not welcome anymore. What do you think about that?
As a Zionist, I am more than happy for Jews to move to Israel. I think that's what Zionism is. It's encouraging Jews to live in Israel and creating. We just created, a little bit more than 60 years ago, created a Jewish state here in Israel. But the question is, if the Jewish communities can't really guard themselves, then maybe it's time for them to look for something else.
Just finally, I mean, as you say, you are a Zionist, you have a particular standpoint. Do you accept what some critics would say, that the video, the way it was done, was an act of provocation?
I don't think it should be a provocation, because this is the way I dress. I wear a kippah on my head every day, everywhere I go, except for certain places in Europe, because I'm afraid for my safety. So I don't think that could be called a provocation, because there was no political statement here. I wouldn't recommend my friends in Europe to walk around with this on their head, because it's dangerous, and it doesn't represent the situation in France. It represents part of the situation in France, 100%.
But it's...
Yeah. Well, just two things, and then we'll go. Israel gets criticized for the wall, the separation barrier, to protect itself from Palestinian snipers and infiltration of Palestinian terrorists. This was in the paper over a week ago. Has anybody heard any criticism of Saudi Arabia, who has plans to build a 600-mile-long wall along its border to keep out the Islamic State fighters? No, nobody's criticizing them for that, because these are bad people. This is the current issue of Dabiq, which is the publication of the Islamic State. The title of this month's publication is called From Hypocrisy to Apostasy. We have been told by Barack Obama that these people are not Islamic, that they have perverted the religion. There's an article in that magazine this month titled, Islam is the religion of the sword, not pacifism. There's a slogan repeated continuously by apologetic duat when flirting with the West, and that is their statement, Islam is the religion of peace. And they mean pacifism by the word peace. How far is their claim from the truth? For Allah has revealed Islam to be the religion of the sword, and the evidence for this is so profuse that only a heretic would argue otherwise. And they say here, here's a picture of a couple gentlemen holding up Islam equals peace with the caption underneath, deviants claiming that Islam equals peace. That's how the Islamic State feels about such statements. I don't have time to go into it this week. We will do this next week. There's a great article, there's a discussion in Time magazine this week about what should we do with the Islamic State? Should we send in troops or should we not? And then there was this article here in the Atlantic, hardly a conservative publication, that says what ISIS really wants and how to stop it. And what they say is they want Sharia law. They want an Islamic State. They are committed fundamentalist Islamists, Muslims. That's what this article says. Now, I think his conclusion that we really, if we go in and fight them on the ground, that gives them what they want. I don't know that that's accurate, but it's interesting that there are some people that get it, but we have a whole administration that seems to be in this Orwellian, if we say it enough, it's not really true type mode. And again, I think this is all part of what is going to happen as we get closer and closer to the return of the Lord, that this deception and this disconnect from reality is going to be more and more apparent to the true remnant church. And it's going to be in politics, it's going to be in culture, moral things, it's going to be in the church. There is, I think, without a doubt coming, a major split within the evangelical church over same-sex marriage and some other things, the use of Scripture. And we'll talk a little bit about that next week when I go through this Andy Stanley stuff, because this is sort of like a magnum opus of all the seeker-sensitive stuff that you've ever heard. This is his teaching of it, and it's extremely confusing and it's very troubling, but I think it's something you need to listen to because he is so influential in so many areas of evangelicalism that it's something that really needs to be addressed. It's an interesting time, it's exciting, it's troubling, and when Jesus said, when you see all this happen, what do? Look up. Let's pray. Father, bless us as we go this week. Give us safe travel on the roads home today. Keep us ever vigilant in your word, dedicated to learning more about your truth and the knowledge that you have given us in that great book. Lord, we pray that you will make us a light, a bright light in a very dark world to those around us. Bless us as we go. In Jesus' name, amen.